Okay, shalom, and welcome to this practical Parsha for Parshat Balak. Balak is a very significant Parsha, as we'll soon learn that in this Parsha we actually learn about one of the most important and key fundamentals in our faith as Jews, namely the belief in Mashiach, the belief in the redemption and the resurrection of the dead. But before we get there, in short, what's the story? The story is that the king of Moab, Balak, he witnesses that which we've learned in the previous Parsha, that Moshe and the Jewish people decimate the two mighty kings, Sichon and Og, who effectively were the gatekeepers of Israel. They were on the path from where the Jews were coming into the land of Canaan. And they were meant and they were paid and they were relied upon to protect the land, to protect the country, and they were nothing. They were like straw. They were just trampled over like straw in front of the might of the Jewish people, which is obviously Hashem's might. So he was scared. And he realizes that with conventional warfare and with regular tactics and strategy, he ain't going to get anywhere. And he was so fearful that he went to the land of Midian. Now, in truth, he's the king of Moab, and Moab and Midian was sworn enemies, ancestrally. They were enemies going back for generations. But you know how it is. Your enemy's enemy is my friend. Or, like we experience today, sadly too often, that sometimes when you have a common enemy, that unites you. That's what happens in the Arab world, let's say, versus Israel, and so on. So in any case, he went to Midian. Why did he go to Midian? Because he did some research. Tells us how to really approach a matter. And he finds out that Moshe spent a significant amount of time, I should say perhaps most of his life, a great portion of his life at least, in the land of Midian. So he says, let me go and ask them what they know about this person and what they know about this leader, because you see, they didn't look at it as being Hashem, they look at it as this powerful leader that they have, because that's all they know. You understand? In their worldview, in the capacity that they have, and their understanding of things, well, your leader is your might. Sichon was the king of the Amorim. Og was the king of Bashan. They were meant to be the might, but obviously they failed. So, he's stronger than them. So let's go see what his power is. Well, they come to Midian and they find out that the power of Moshe is not in his hands, it's not in his might, it's not in the weaponry that he has, it's not in the strategy that he knows to make, but it's in his mouth. With his prayer, with his power of speech. So, what do you do to fight it? Find a way to counter it. And thus they turn to Bilam. Bilam is a non-Jewish prophet. This non-Jewish prophet, there are varying opinions and varying suggestions, but according to some, imagine this, according to some, on a certain level, he had a greater level of prophecy than even Moses. Can you imagine? And he was not a non-Jew, and he was a very impure person, as we're going to soon learn. Certainly not a saintly man. In fact, Bilam's history with the Jews goes back way before this. It goes back actually a few hundred years prior to this. You see, the sages tell us that when the Jews were in Egypt, you remember when it says in the beginning of the book of Exodus, the book of Shemot, it says, Paro said to his nation, Hava nischat malo, let's do some scheme, let's try to see what we can do to outsmart the Jews. Who was he talking to? Well, the sages tell us that in fact, Bilam was one of his advisors. And most of his ideas, most of the conspiracy against the Jews came from who? From So Bilam really was not only a wise man, he also had powers of prophecy, but he was also a very wicked man. And as we'll soon learn, an extremely greedy person, and all he thought about was what most greedy people, or all greedy people think about, is money and what we know as kavod, imagined honor. Right? Money and honor, or power. Thus, they come to Bilam and they say, come curse these people. And Bilam responds in the affirmative. Of course. And he's so excited to do so. And right from the get-go, God gives him the signals. You're doing the wrong thing. This is not a desirable thing. This is not going to turn out well for you. Well, like in every case, especially when God's dealing with the human being, or I should say more particularly with the Jews, or in matters related to the Jews, there is one sacred thing that Hashem never oversteps, and that is the free choice, the gift of free choice that he gave to man. And that's why when he makes the signals, when he gives us the signals, much too often, they're not blatant, they're not totally obvious, because then it wouldn't be a choice anymore, then it would be so, right? If you're driving down a road, and you can actually see the cliff and the depth of it, you stop driving. If you only see a suggestive warning sign, some people take it seriously and say, let me think about this, right? And some people, try to push the limit. That's free choice, right? And then perhaps by the time they figure they have to stop, it's too late, they're speeding. You know what I mean? In this case, Hashem wasn't going to take away the free choice from Bilam, but yet Hashem in his mercy and his compassion gave him signals. And one of them was that Hashem appeared to him in his dream at night and said, where are you going? Because what happened was when the delegation came from Moab and from Midian, Bilam said to them, of course, let me see what God has to say. I'll let you know in the morning. He didn't tell them the truth, that maybe, I don't think this doesn't sound like a good idea. I don't know if I should be doing this. You know what I mean? God says to him, what is this all about? And he tries to play games, so to speak, fool God, thinking that he can kind of mislead him. And he's like, what do you mean? These people honor me so much. They came, they need my services. And then Hashem basically says to him, okay, you want to go? Well, it's your choice. So I want to start with something, before we get to the Mashiach aspect, and of course we all know how this turns out, that at the end, not only Bilam didn't curse the Jews, but he gave them the greatest blessings and compliments that anyone has ever given them, especially coming from such an objective source, somebody who hates us, and considering that this is really the first and one of the primary mentions in the Torah, explicit descriptions of what the future holds, namely the coming of Mashiach and the redemption. And that came from who? From one of our worst enemies, from a sworn enemy, somebody who hated the Jews so much, who tried to undermine us even before we became a nation, who after we're already a nation, we're about to enter Israel, wants to undermine us, wants to curse us, and as we'll see at the end of the Parsha, when he's failed in that, he tried to do something that he knew is going to bring us down, and that is to get us to sin. And this, to sum it up in the words of the Talmud, is amazingly, and you see it over and over again in the world, the way Hashem made his world. The Talmud says, quote, from the forest itself, you take the wood with which you make the handle for the axe to chop down the forest. That's the way Hashem made it. It means the ultimate victory, the ultimate accomplishment is not that Moshe should give us the vision, the promise, the prophecy of the redemption, but that our stark enemy, who hates us so much, he is the one who speaks about the ultimate glory of the Jewish people. That sums up the Parsha. But I want to focus in on something which really, if you look at the Parsha on a practical level, there's some very, very important lessons in something which is one of the most important fundamentals of being a Jew. What comes to mind when we think about being a Jew? Living life as a Jew. Observance, right? For most people, it's observance. Keep the Shabbos, eat this, don't eat that, to pray. You know, the rituals, the do's and the don'ts. But the truth is, and as exemplified, and as we witness in the Maimonides, who's actually the first one to really compose a structured manual of Jewish life from beginning to end. How does he start it off? After giving us the fundamentals of believing in God, he gives us a section of rules, a section of what I would call perspective on how to live our lives, how to have good character, how to have good mitot, good character traits, how to be benevolent and kind. In other words, before we get to the do's and don'ts, we need to know how to treat our fellow human being, how to treat ourselves, how to live, what our outlook should be. And a lot of that we can get in this week's Parsha. Let's begin. Turn to Parshat Balak, chapter 22, verse 18. Chapter 22, verse 18. Right? What happens? They came to, if you look into the first verse 16, it says the delegation, this is already a second delegation, they're trying to coerce, they're trying to convince Bilam to come. It says they came to Bilam and they said to him, the following is a message from Balak, the son of Tzipor. Please do not refuse to come to me, for I will honor you greatly, and whatever you tell me I will do. If you would just please come and curse these people for me. And here's verse 18. Bilam answered and he said to the Balak's servants, even if Balak would give me silver and gold enough to fill this house, I cannot transgress the word of Hashem my God. Now usually, what a person says is what they really want. Especially when they're saying it so innocently. And in this case, so truthfully. What did he say? Believe me, I want to go. But if all your promises, even if Balak should give me the entire house full of silver and gold, unfortunately, if Hashem doesn't let me, I can't go. From the fact that he said that, the sages tell us that here we see another great character flaw that Bilam had. And that is the tremendous greed that he had. Whatever he had was not enough for him. What was he really seeking? What was his desire? What was his want? A whole house full of gold and silver. It says that he had big eyes that were never satisfied. It was never enough for him. And this is what did him in. Because of this great temptation he had for money and for riches, and even though there's no reason to believe that he wasn't rich, I mean, by any stretch of imagination, having his status and his stature, I'm sure he was very comfortable. But what does he want? He smells an opportunity. A house, a mansion full of gold and silver. Says the Talmud. What he desired, he didn't get. And he ended up losing everything. By the end, because of his determination to come and curse the Jews, in this hope of not only doing away with his enemies, the Jews, but also getting all his gold and silver that he imagined, he ended up losing everything he had and the most precious thing that one has, namely his life. So this teaches us, of course, as a Jew, one has to have a desire for success. Very, very important. The idea that some people have, this notion that somebody who believes in God, or somebody who's a devout follower of the Torah, has no worldly desires at all, that's not true. That's patently false. You have to, but for the right purposes. You want to be comfortable, so you could feed your family, so you can live a comfortable life, so you can lead a good life, so you can be benevolent, so you can give charity, so you can help others, so you can build institutions where they can study Torah and so on. But not just for the purpose of accumulating wealth. Not just so you can, like the Rebbe would sometimes say, so you can look in your bank statement. In those days you have a bank book. Today you go online and see that you have another zero added to your sum total of your net worth. You understand? Just so you can have another zero and another zero and another zero. That is what Bilam desired. That's not the way of a Jew. But to want to be successful, in fact, I would argue, and I'm confident that this is consistent very much with the Torah view. This is really what it's about. For one to deny success, for one to actually refuse to have success, when success is in his potential, and wealth and so on, that actually is almost like a slap in the face. That's actually almost a way of showing lack of appreciation to Hashem for the potential, for the abilities that He gave us. That's almost like somebody gives you a gift and you throw it away in front of their face. You just drop it and break it. What do you mean? Right? When you refuse it, in front of them in a very blatant manner. Another very interesting thing, and here's something very, very powerful. This is powerful. This is perhaps, I would say, the most powerful of all character traits. The most powerful ones. Look at the bottom of our page. In our page, it's page 412. That's chapter 22, verse 21. What happens after God appears to him in the dream at night, and he says to him, listen, if the people are coming to call for you, fine, go with them. What does he say? What does it say, I mean? Bilam arose in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with the Moabite dignitaries. I ask you a question. Imagine a person like Bilam. And remember, based on what I told you before, he was no youngster. He was a few hundred years old. But put that aside. Bilam is a very, very respected man. And like I said before, I imagine Bilam was not poor. But certainly at this juncture, he has all these important dignitaries, and each one of them has servants. Is it befitting a man of his stature to go and saddle his own donkey? Something doesn't seem right. So the sages tell us, from here we see that sin'ah means hatred, deep-rooted hatred. Mikalkelet et hashura. It actually distorts all sense of protocol, all sense of, proper etiquette. Because he hated the Jews with such a passion, he could not help himself. He was so eager to get onto the road that when he woke up, he didn't even take the time, make the effort to just call for one of the servants, somebody who's charged with doing this task, and he ran ahead and he did it himself. It says that a heavenly voice said, sorry, mister, somebody already beat you to it. And who was that? Who was that? Let's look back in the book of Bereshit, in the book of Genesis, also chapter 22, verse 3. And that is concerning our father Abraham, Avrohom Avinu. Avraham Avinu, when he was commanded by God in his final test to go and offer his son as an offering on Mount Moriah, look what it says in verse 3. Avram woke early in the morning, saddled his donkey, chapter 22, verse 3. That's page 48 in our book. Saddled his donkey, and he took his two lads, the two attendants, and he went and he set out on the road. Again, the same question. Also considering that at this point of this story, when this story takes place, that namely the Akedah of Yitzchak, Avram is 137 years old. The man has accumulated wealth. He was one of the richest people in the world, perhaps, if not the richest person at the time. He has servants. Not only does he have servants, he has followers, people who would be glad to do a service for him, to show him honor. And yet he does it himself. And again, the sages comment, Ahava. What's Ahava?
Love.
Love. Mikalkelet Ashura. Love distorts all protocol, all sense of proper, what we would consider proper etiquette. Avrohom, he loved Hashem so much. He was so eager to set out to do Hashem's will. Hashem said to him, this is what I want you to do. That he arose early in the morning and he ran to the donkey, even the few moments it would take to call upon one of his servants. He didn't want to wait that time, and he did it all by himself. He didn't want to give up part of the mitzvah for anyone else. This, if you really think about it, love versus hate, or hate versus love, these are the most powerful agents that have built and sadly destroyed many a people, many a country, and we see it happening in our world today. What people will do in the name of hate is unthinkable, unfathomable. Maybe in yesteryear they couldn't even imagine the things that we know today, and sadly have become to some extent commonplace because of hatred, because of whatever the hatred is fueled by. But the bottom line is hatred. Love. What does love do? When you love someone. And this is why the mitzvah of loving your fellow Jew is one of the most important fundamentals of Judaism. When you love another Jew, you will do things that defy the norm, that defy the order and the protocol of what the norm calls for. And even if that person doesn't really perhaps deserve what they're asking of you and so on, but when you love someone so much, you're ready to jump in fire and water for that person. Or something, you're ready to jump in fire and water. And that's why the key elements of Judaism is, what do we say in the Shema? You should love Hashem your God. It's not enough to fear. Fear makes a distance. Love makes you closer. You do things that defy even logic. You do things that defy convenience and one's comfort. And this is also the same thing. Why? Well, before we even begin to pray, before one even starts their day, what do we say? I hereby accept upon myself the commandment of loving fellow Jew. Even before we say I love God. Because if you can love, you can do anything. Right. Because if you love, you can do anything. Sadly, the counterpart of that, which is the Bilam, is if you hate, you can also do everything. And sadly, look what hatred can bring people to do. Hatred can bring people to foolishly and ridiculously think that taking their own life and taking other people's lives is actually a virtue.
Desensitized
what the last 100 years have shown us, when it comes to hatred, and our hatred, how powerful it is, the father of all of that, or the grandfather of all of that, is right here, Mr. Bilam himself. Let's move on to another very, very powerful thing. If you look, chapter 24, verse 5. Chapter 24, verse 5. After so much back and forth, and Bilam is trying, and he's trying, and he's trying. And the fool thinks that he's going to be able to somehow, stick his foot in the door and somehow get a word in, get that right moment, that right opportune moment when he's going to be able to curse the Jews and have it condoned by Hashem. And everything he tried, every time he tried, didn't work. He even tried to come and see them from this angle, from that angle. And then he went up to a very, very tall peak. And he was able to see the entirety of the Jewish people. Remember, it was a small city. Not a small city in population. Actually, population-wise, it was the size of a country. But the layout, the geography, it was a small city. Because remember, population-wise, there were several million people. And one of the things he noticed, one of the things he saw and expressed his amazement about is actually incorporated in our prayers. We actually begin the prayer service with this every day. And that is the verse over here. Look at verse 5. He said, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. How good are your tents, Jacob, Yaakov, your dwelling places, Israel. Now there's many meanings to this, right? This also refers to the tents of Torah, the places, the Beit Midrash, the study halls, and the places, the Mishkanotas, the dwelling places where Jews pray to God. But literally, in this context, what it refers to is, the sages tell us that when he looked out and he saw the camp of the Jews, he saw the way all the tribes were laid out. He couldn't help but notice an amazing thing. And he said, wow, how wonderful, how amazing these people are. And this is also one of the most important virtues of the Jewish people. And that is the virtue of modesty. You see, the Jews were all living in tents. The nature is, when you live in tents, and that explains why the geography was much smaller proportionally to how much you would need to house several million people. But still, each family had its own tent. Tent doesn't take up that much space, but it still takes up space. And near your tent is another tent. And on the other side of your tent is another tent. And he noticed how systematically each tent was situated in a way that the opening of the tent did not face the opening of the next tent. To enhance the presence of modesty. So imagine somebody's getting dressed or undressed, somebody's sleeping, or somebody's maybe not properly dressed in one tent. There's never ever a possibility that a person might exit or open the door to their tent and unexpectedly look into someone else's tent. There was no way. The back of your tent was facing the other tent. This is a fundamental in Judaism. In fact, if you open the code of Jewish law, true, it starts with the fundamental of believing and realizing all the time that we're in the presence of God. But immediately, and perhaps not separate to that, but as a continuation of that, it immediately goes over to the laws of modesty.
Oh, yeah.
You read the code of Jewish law. And it tells you how to get dressed, how one should go to the bathroom, and so on. And you're like, one second. Is this about religion? Is this about how to serve God, how to worship God? Tell me how to pray. Tell me how to wash my hands. Laws of modesty? Yes. That's what he noticed about the Jewish people. That's the hallmark of being a Jew. Because you remember, when you're modest, what you're really saying is, I am modest even in the privacy of my own bedroom. Why am I modest even in the privacy of my own bedroom? Or even when I go to the bathroom? Because that expresses the fact that I'm cognizant of the fact that this is no private place. There's always something and someone with me. Who's that? Hashem. So the greatest expression of faith is practicing modesty. Is being modest. And that also, of course, is synonymous with being humble. That's also a form of modesty. So I remember I said that this Parsha is a very fundamental Parsha when it comes to Jewish law and Jewish beliefs and our outlook on things. You see it already. These are just several examples.
They even tell you how to walk.
Yeah, how to walk in a modest, humble way.
Yep.
Okay?
Not in the
unless you're from the hood.
Right.
Unless you're from the hood.
Well, they still, when they get beat up,
Everybody walks.
everybody gets
Yes.
humble.
Yeah, you get very humble. Humbled.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, let's continue. Fundamental. And these are the laws, the prophecy of Mashiach. Let's look at chapter 25, verse 17. Chapter 25, verse 17. First, he boasts as being the one who's able to see into the future. And then he says, I see it, but not now. I perceive it, but not in the near future. A star has gone forth from Jacob, and a staff has arisen from Israel, which will smash the corners of Moab and impale all the sons of Shais. Edom will be his possession, and Seir shall become the possession of his enemies. But Israel, the Yisrael, the children of Israel, will triumph. A ruler shall come from Jacob, who will annihilate the survivors of the city. And even later he goes and he says what's going to be the end with all the nations, especially those that started up with and antagonized the Jewish people. He speaks about two eras in general. One is the beginning, the seed of Mashiach. Who is that? The beginning of the kingdom, which is King David. He says it will arise from Jacob, because Jacob connotates a level, our level as Jews, which is not the ultimate, the supreme level of Israel, which deserves a discussion in its own right, perhaps another time. So he says, first, a star shall rise, like a little tiny star starts to shine, and that's Jacob. That's David, but it's still on the level of Jacob. And later, ultimately, it will rise to being a staff, firm staff of Israel. That's where Mashiach comes. But Mashiach is a sign of the house of and the seed of King David. And as I mentioned before, this is the ultimate. That Bilam, who wanted to bring the Jews down, was the one who revealed the greatest triumph, the ultimate triumph of the Jewish people, the coming of Mashiach. And in fact, there's something else very, very powerful here. And I heard the story just to illustrate this. There was once a rabbi his father was a rabbi. His father passed away. His father was a rabbi. He had a group of Hasidim, followers. And of course, he felt like he should be the successor. He's the son. But apparently he was not so, let's just say he wasn't fit for the job. And thus the Hasidim did not rally around him. His father's followers didn't rally around him and didn't ask him to succeed his father on leading them. He felt very eager to have this position, I guess not realizing his shortcomings. So he went to another Rebbe, I heard it was actually the 5th Chabad Rebbe, trying to hint to him, he didn't feel comfortable enough to outright ask him, please, can you show support? Can you rally some support for me so the Hasidim embrace me? But he tried to hint it. He wanted it to come from the Rebbe Rasha, Rabbi Shalom of Lubavitch. So he said, I had a dream. My father came to me in a dream and said that it's time I take the reins of leadership. And the Rebbe ignored it. And this happened several times. The Rebbe basically can see right through his bluff. Finally, I guess when the Rebbe saw he can't get rid of him, because he kept on, hinting and hinting with the story about the dream. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe said to him, next time he comes to you in the dream, why don't you tell him that he should go to the Hasidim and tell them that they should embrace you as the Rebbe? In other words, the fact that you want to be Rebbe, the fact that you're so proud of yourself, that's obvious. They're the ones who need to believe in you. That vein, Even one of the greatest prophets, who's known as the prophet of the redemption, who's that? Yeshayahu, Isaiah, who speaks so much about the redemption, and most of what we know about the promises, about the future, about the redemption holds, comes from the book of Isaiah. Even he, at the end of the day, you can say, well, but he was a Jewish prophet. It's obvious, it's natural that he'll speak positively about the Jews and about their future. Nowhere is there a prophecy as powerful as Bilam's. He, who is the staunch, sworn enemy of the Jewish people, he is the one who prophesizes that Mashiach will come. And in fact, in such a clear and blatant manner. And this is actually one of the principles of belief of the Jewish belief system. In fact, in Chabad, we don't have the custom to actually say it every day. But the 13 principles of faith, there are many, many people who after they finish the morning prayers, they actually read it off. We do the six remembrances that you're supposed to remember, the 6 things that the Torah tells us you're supposed to remember each and every day. And then they read off the 13 principles of faith. Because this is the principles. It's like saying, I gotta know, what do we believe in? You believe in God. You believe in the coming of Mashiach. You believe in the resurrection of the dead. You believe Torah is from Sinai, from Moses, from Sinai. You believe in this. And without this, you don't have Judaism. In fact, every time we stand up to pray, every time we even pray for a personal thing, meaning, we're praying for a need that I have right here, right now. We talk about Mashiach. Even if I get what I need right here, right now, it's not complete. It's not whole, unless A, I believe in Mashiach, and B, Mashiach comes. Furthermore, even in time of tragedy, even in time of disaster, when a Jew has to go through the most painful thing in life, mourning the loss of a loved one, what does he do? He gets up and he glorifies Hashem's name. And what does he speak about? His unconditional, unwavering faith. Absolute belief in the coming of Mashiach, that Hashem's name will be extolled. We complete our prayers. How do we go home? How do we go away from our prayers? On that day, Hashem will be one and His name will be one. We start with Mashiach. We finish with Mashiach. Mashiach is not what people, unfortunately, mistakenly attribute to the suffering of Jewish people. So it was kind of one of those false promises, at least in their mind, that, kind of like this wishful thing to help us get through. You promise, it's almost, God forbid, they would equate it maybe to when you're on a long journey and the child is already, up to here, driving you nuts. Are we there yet? When are we getting there? You start to promise them different things, or so have them look out for, while you're driving down Wyoming, happen to look out to see if he sees the Statue of Liberty or something like that. You know what I mean? To give him some kind of false hope and something to occupy him and distract him. No, that's not what it is. We need Mashiach, even in the best of times. We need Mashiach, not even, but especially when things are perfect. That's when you need Mashiach. Because whatever perfection one could reach in this world is out of perfection. Just to be a little cynical, to give you an idea how Jews, sadly, too often, and are not deliberate or intentional, this is because of lack of knowledge, because of, a real product of ignorance. But they say the story with this guy. He had an investment firm, and he's doing very well. He has a brokerage. One morning, he runs in the morning, as they're about to start trading for the day, and he runs from one desk to another, liquidate everything. And, the memos are going out to every single employee. Don't do any trades today, just liquidate. And by the time the bell rings at the end of the day, I want everything in cash. Okay? I mean, he owns the place. They're looking, the market's doing fantastic. What's this problem? But look, he owns the place and they're employees, so they got to do what he says. And frantically all day they're selling. By the end of the day, the market's up, and he had sold everything. The next day, the market opens up, the bell rings, the market opens up. Within 20 minutes, crashed. The whole market crashed. Everybody was left with their pants down. He's the only guy that was left standing. He had everything in liquid assets. So they all came to him and says, how did you know? There were no signs. How did you know? What are you, a prophet?
Everything was perfect.
Even inside information wouldn't have given you that. No one knew. He says, I don't know for nothing. Just yesterday in the morning, as I'm standing there in shul, rolling up my tefillin, Yanko, the rich guy, the billionaire, the richest man here in New York, I heard him say, Oi, we need Mashiach. If he needs Mashiach, he must know of some terrible, terrible things that are coming our way. I better liquidate everything. Sadly, for too long, that was the notion in many people's minds. Oh, in the Holocaust they spoke about Mashiach because it was like just a hope, something to get them, like who knows, maybe God will, some will get out of this. No. Mashiach is even when you're comfortable, you're having a good meal. You're having a good meal! You're enjoying yourself, you're on vacation, you have a comfortable bed, everything's good, the bank account is fine, everyone's fine. What do we say in the blessing after the meal? Uvenei Yerushalayim, build Jerusalem, please. I thank you for the food, but that's not really what I'm here about. I want you to build Jerusalem, please, Hashem. Don't forget your country, don't forget your city, don't forget your people.
Also, you have Bnei Yerushalayim
exactly.
Every day.
The idea is, Mashiach is not just a cop-out. It's not just some kind of antidote to ease the pain. You know what I mean? Some kind of remedy. It's not a pain medication. Mashiach is real. Look how real it is. Where is the Torah telling us about Mashiach? When is the Torah telling us about Mashiach?
From the beginning.
At a time when the Jews are in their glory. They're about to enter Israel. They don't know of what we know. They don't know of destruction. They don't know of a temple being destroyed. They don't know. They're only looking up. No one's looking down. It's great. They've experienced all these miracles. They've made it so far. They have everything. They're on top of the world. Bilam reminds them, we need Mashiach. That's what Mashiach's all about. Because no matter how good it is, the world has not reached its ultimate state. So with that, we'll conclude and say, let us have Mashiach. Speedily now.
Baruch Hashem.